My name is Elena, and for most of my life, I believed love was something you built slowly, like a house you return to every night and fix piece by piece. I believed that trust was not a feeling, but a habit, something you practiced until it became part of who you were. I believed that if two people chose each other every day, the world would eventually step aside and let them live. I met Ryan when I was 31, at a point in my life when I had already made peace with the idea that real love might arrive quietly or not at all. I had a stable job, a small apartment I liked, and routines that kept me grounded. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't searching. That made him feel like a surprise instead of a solution. He worked in product management at a tech company downtown. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, seated across from each other at a long table that was too loud for deep conversations and perfect for first impressions. He had an easy way of listening, leaning in slightly when someone spoke, nodding without interrupting. When it was my turn to talk, he didn't rush me. He asked questions that made sense, not the kind people ask just to hear themselves speak. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car without making it feel like a performance. He didn't try to kiss me. He said he'd like to see me again if I wanted to, and the way he said it made it clear that my answer actually mattered. We started dating in a way that felt adult and calm. Dinners during the week, long walks on weekends, conversations that wandered without trying to impress. He told me about his past relationship, a woman he had lived with for years before they grew apart. He said it ended quietly, without drama, and I believed him because there was no bitterness in his voice. I told him about my father's death and how it changed my relationship with time, how it made me value consistency more than excitement. When people ask how you know someone is right for you, the honest answer is that you don't. You just notice that your body relaxes around them. That's what happened with Ryan. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I stopped checking my phone so often. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered small details. He introduced me to his friends without hesitation. After a year, we moved in together. Living together didn't reveal anything frightening. It made things easier. We learned each other's habits and worked around them. He left his shoes by the door. I needed quiet in the mornings. We negotiated space like people who wanted to stay. When we fought, we talked until the tension softened. He never raised his voice. He never called me names. That mattered more to me than grand gestures ever could. When he proposed, it was simple. No crowd, no cameras, just us in the kitchen after dinner, the smell of garlic still in the air. He said he wanted to build a life with me that felt safe. I said yes, without feeling fear hide behind the joy. We married the following summer. The first years of marriage were not perfect, but they were real. We worked, we cooked, we planned trips we sometimes postponed. We talked about kids in a cautious way, like people who wanted them but weren't in a hurry. My mother loved him. My friends trusted him. He became part of my sense of home. Then his job changed. He was promoted into a role that came with travel, longer hours, and new pressure. At first, I supported him without question. I adjusted my schedule. I picked up more of the household weight. I told myself this was what partnership looked like when things became uneven for a while. Slowly, small things shifted. He started checking his phone more often. He began placing it face down on the table. He smiled at messages and then locked the screen quickly. When I asked about his trips, he gave me summaries instead of stories. He was still affectionate, still present in our shared routines, but there was a thin layer of distance I couldn't name. I told myself not to invent problems. I told myself not to become suspicious without reason. I had promised myself I would never turn into someone who searched for proof instead of trusting her partner. The night everything cracked open was ordinary. He had just returned from a conference in Seattle. We ate takeout on the couch and talked about nothing important. He kissed me goodnight and went to shower. His phone buzzed on the counter beside me. I didn't pick it up. I didn't plan to look. The screen lit up, and my eyes caught the preview before I could stop them. Already missing you. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No music, no slow realization. Just a sudden heaviness in my chest, like air had been replaced with something thicker. When he came back into the room, the way his hand moved toward the phone was enough. It was protective, automatic. I asked him who had texted. He hesitated for less than a second, but it was enough. He said it was a colleague, someone joking about the conference. He said it casually, too casually. I asked him to show me the message because I needed clarity more than comfort. He unlocked the phone and handed it to me. The messages were intimate without being explicit. Private jokes, familiar language, photos sent late at night. Plans hinted at but not spelled out. The woman's name was Brooke. She worked with him. She traveled with him. I sat down because my legs felt unreliable. He talked. He apologized. He explained. He said it didn't mean anything serious. He said it started when he felt overwhelmed and flattered. He said he loved me. He said he never wanted to hurt me. He said it was already over. I listened and felt something settle into place, something cold and clear. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with chaos. Sometimes it arrives with explanations that make sense until you realize they don't change the truth. I told him to leave for the night. He argued gently at first, then desperately. He offered counseling. He offered transparency. He offered everything except the one thing I needed in that moment, which was space to hear my own thoughts. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt unfamiliar, like a set built for someone else's life. I cried the next day. I cried in the shower. I cried on the kitchen floor. I cried because I felt foolish and small and angry with myself for not seeing it sooner. Then, after the crying passed, the quiet returned. Not numbness. Focus. The next week moved in a strange rhythm. On the outside, it looked like normal life still existed. The trains still ran, my inbox still filled up. Grocery stores still played soft music in the aisles. Inside me, everything was rearranging itself quietly, like furniture being shifted in the dark. Ryan stayed in a hotel for 3 nights. He texted constantly. He apologized in long paragraphs, then in short ones, then in messages that were only a few words because he didn't know what else to say. He asked if we could talk. He asked if I'd meet him for coffee. He asked if he could come home, even just to sleep on the couch. I told him I needed time. Time is a harmless word. It sounds gentle. It sounds fair. It also gives you room to breathe when breathing has become work. On the 4th day, I met him at a quiet cafe near our apartment. It was early enough that the place was almost empty. He walked in looking tired, his hair slightly off, his eyes red in a way that told me he had either been crying or pretending he hadn't been. He sat across from me and folded his hands like he was trying to keep them from shaking. He apologized again. He said he hated himself. He said he didn't know what he was thinking. He said it started on a work trip when they had drinks after a long day. He said he felt wanted. He said it made him feel young and interesting in a way he hadn't felt in a while. He said he loved me and still wanted our marriage. He kept saying love as if the word itself was evidence. When I asked how long, he paused and then told me the truth. 6 months. The number landed hard. 6 months wasn't one mistake. 6 months was a second life. It was weeks of decisions. It was lies told over and over until they became routine. I asked him if Brooke knew he was married. He said yes. I asked him if she had been in our apartment. He hesitated, then said no. But his eyes moved away for a moment, and that movement told me everything. Even when he tried to be honest, he still reached for a version of truth that protected him. I asked him if it was over. He said it was. I asked if he was willing to show me everything, messages, emails, travel records, whatever I needed. He said yes immediately. Too quickly. Like someone agreeing to anything to stop the bleeding. That was when I realized something important. His goal wasn't repair. His goal was relief. He wanted the fear to end. He wanted to stop feeling like the bad guy. He wanted me to do the work of calming him down after he had shattered the life I trusted. When you see that clearly, something changes. I told him I wanted a divorce. He stared at me like he couldn't hear the words. Then he began negotiating. Therapy. A separation instead. A fresh start. He said we could be stronger after this. He said people make mistakes. He said I was throwing away years over something that didn't mean anything. I watched the way his tone shifted, the way his sadness tried to turn into reason, and then into frustration. I watched him reach for the easiest defense, making my reaction the problem. I told him this wasn't about throwing anything away. It was about realizing it had already been thrown away, and I was the only one still trying to hold it together. He asked if there was someone else. He asked it sharply, like he needed to believe my decision was caused by something external rather than his choices. When I said no, he looked almost disappointed. He wanted an excuse he could use later. We left the cafe separately. I walked home slowly, not because I was lost, but because I needed the time between that conversation and the moment I opened my front door. I needed to cross the line from being a woman who was considering divorce to being a woman who had chosen it. When I got home, the apartment felt different. It was still our furniture, our dishes, our photos, but the meaning had shifted. I stared at our wedding picture on the shelf. We looked happy. I remember that day being real. I remember the warmth in my chest when I said yes, the way I believed the future would be something we built together. The picture didn't lie. Ryan did. Over the next month, the divorce began. It was paperwork, meetings, and quiet arguments about things that suddenly had price tags. Who keeps the apartment? Who gets the car? Who takes what furniture? We didn't have children, so there were fewer permanent ties. But there were still the shared routines, the shared friends, the shared story of who we were. Ryan wanted that story to remain clean. He told me he wanted to keep things respectful. He suggested we tell people we had grown apart. He said he didn't want anyone to take sides. I told him I didn't want drama either, but I refused to lie for him. So I told the truth, quietly. I didn't send out announcements. I didn't write long posts. When people asked, I said he had been unfaithful and I was leaving. Some people were shocked. Some people looked uncomfortable. A few people tried to soften it immediately, saying things like, "But he's a good guy," or "Sometimes things happen," as if cheating was a weather event. I didn't argue with them. I simply repeated the truth without emotion until it became real in the room. Ryan moved in with a friend for a while, then rented a place downtown. He said he had cut Brooke off. He said he wanted to focus on becoming a better man. He said he was going to therapy. Then Nina called me one night, her voice tight, and told me she had seen Ryan and Brooke together at a bar. It wasn't even the sight itself that hurt. It was the confirmation of something I had already suspected. The relationship wasn't an accident that ended when it was exposed. It was a choice he wanted, and I had been in the way. I thought that realization would make me rage. Instead, it made me steady. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. When the last paper was signed, I expected something dramatic to happen inside me. I expected to feel either free or destroyed. Instead, I felt a quiet emptiness, like I had been running on a plan for months and the plan had ended, leaving me standing still. I moved into a smaller apartment on the north side. I took only what was mine. I bought a new bed because I couldn't stand the idea of sleeping where Ryan had slept beside me while lying to my face. I started therapy more consistently, not because I wanted to heal quickly, but because I needed my mind to stay clear. Betrayal has a way of making you doubt your own judgment, and I refused to live in that fog. For a while, I tried to rebuild in the most ordinary ways. I went to work. I cooked simple meals. I took long walks near the lake, letting wind cut through my thoughts. I avoided mutual gatherings at first, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't have the energy to perform calm in front of people who wanted the story to be comfortable. Ryan, meanwhile, built a new public life quickly. He posted pictures with friends. He went to events. He looked fine. He looked like a man who had survived a breakup and come out wiser. He didn't talk about the cheating. He didn't talk about the lies. He talked about hard lessons and personal growth, the kind of vague language people use when they want sympathy without accountability. And he kept rising at work. That part surprised me more than anything else. I knew life wasn't fair, but seeing him continue to be rewarded while I rebuilt myself from the inside out did something to me. It wasn't jealousy. It was recognition. The system around him was designed to protect men like him, especially when they were good at being charming. Ryan was very good at being charming. I heard small things through Nina and through other friends who still had ties to his company. He was respected there. He was seen as reliable. He was mentoring younger employees. He was praised for leading with integrity. Integrity. I saw the word on a public post he wrote, a long paragraph about trust and culture and values. He spoke like a man giving advice on how to build strong relationships, professional and personal. I stared at the post for a long time, not because I was shocked, because I understood exactly what he was doing. He was writing a new story, one where he was a good man who made a mistake, learned, and moved forward. One where his success proved he deserved respect. One where my pain became irrelevant because his life looked fine. I didn't want to ruin him because he had moved on. I wanted him to stop being able to rewrite reality. That was when the idea of revenge became something real, not as a fantasy, but as a plan. I didn't want something violent. I didn't want to hurt anyone physically. I didn't want to become the kind of person who lives for destruction. I wanted something quieter and more precise. I wanted consequences that fit what he had actually done. Ryan's biggest strength was his image, his calm, his public values, his reputation as a man people could trust. So I started paying attention. I watched from a distance, in the way you watch weather patterns when you know a storm is coming. I didn't stalk him. I didn't break laws. I simply noticed what was already visible, and I kept records. I saved posts where he preached about trust. I saved messages he had sent me after the divorce that revealed his bitterness. I saved moments where his public story clashed with private behavior. The record began as a small folder on my laptop. Then it became a system. At first, it was only for my own sanity. I wanted proof that my memory was accurate, because betrayal can make you doubt everything. Over time, the folder turned into something else. A mirror. A mirror I could hold up when the time was right. Months passed. I became steadier. I started sleeping through the night again. I started laughing without forcing it. I stopped checking my phone constantly. I began dating casually, not because I was ready for something serious, but because I wanted to remember that life could be bigger than what happened to me. Then I heard something through Nina that tightened my chest in a new way. Ryan had been mentoring a younger woman at work. People had noticed how close they were. It wasn't public, but it was the kind of closeness that creates rumors. Then, quietly, the woman switched teams. No one called it what it was. They just said she wanted a fresh start. When Nina told me, her voice had that careful tone people use when they aren't sure how you'll react. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I felt something settle into place. Ryan hadn't just cheated on me. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had a pattern, and the pattern was about power, about attention, about control, about using trust as something he deserved, not something he had to protect. That made it bigger than my heartbreak. It made it a risk to other people. And it meant the system might care, not because the system has a heart, but because the system fears liability. I knew then that if I was going to act, I had to do it carefully. I had to be calm. I had to be believable. I had to be patient. Once I accepted that this was no longer only about my marriage, my thinking changed. Pain has a way of narrowing your vision at first. You focus on what was taken from you, on the words that were said, on the nights you replay in your head. When time passes and the pain stops screaming, it starts explaining. It shows you patterns you were too close to see before. I didn't wake up one morning feeling powerful. I woke up feeling responsible. I had spent months rebuilding myself piece by piece. I had learned how to sit alone without panicking. I had learned how to trust my own memory again. I had learned that love doesn't disappear just because it was betrayed, but it does become more careful. That work mattered, because revenge built on chaos collapses. Revenge built on clarity holds. I kept living my life in ways that looked ordinary. I showed up to work. I took on a new project that challenged me in good ways. I went to dinner with friends and laughed without feeling like I was faking it. I let my mother visit and complain about my small kitchen. I let Nina drag me out on nights when I wanted to stay home. I made space for joy because I needed proof that Ryan had not taken that from me too. At the same time, I continued to observe. Ryan's career accelerated. He was promoted again, this time into a role with real authority. He led teams. He approved budgets. He signed off on hiring decisions. His name appeared on internal announcements and external panels. He was becoming exactly the kind of man companies like to showcase. That made him dangerous. People like Ryan don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as misunderstood heroes. They justify their behavior because the world keeps rewarding them. Every promotion becomes proof that they are good. Every smile from leadership becomes confirmation that their version of events is the right one. I paid attention to what people said quietly, through Nina, through acquaintances, through conversations that were never meant to reach me. I heard the same themes repeat. Ryan liked being admired. He liked attention from women who looked up to him. He blurred lines in ways that made people uncomfortable but unsure of how to name it. He never touched anyone. He never said anything explicit. He just leaned in too close, stayed too long, made compliments that felt personal when they shouldn't have been. He stayed just inside the space where people doubt themselves. That is where the most damage happens. I started writing things down properly. Dates, names, context. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't guess. If something couldn't be verified, I didn't include it. I learned quickly that credibility comes from restraint. When you include only what you can stand behind, the story speaks louder. I also learned how companies think. They don't respond to emotion. They respond to risk. They don't ask who is right. They ask, what could go wrong if this becomes public, if this becomes legal, if this becomes expensive? So I framed everything that way in my mind, not as a betrayed wife, but as someone who understood patterns of behavior and consequences. I waited longer than most people would have. Part of that was fear. Acting too soon would expose me as angry and reactive. Another part was timing. Ryan was still rising. The higher he climbed, the more damage a fall would cause. Not because I wanted him humiliated, but because visibility creates accountability. The moment came quietly. A former colleague of Ryan's reached out to Nina after a company event. She said Ryan had said something to her that made her uncomfortable. Not threatening, not crude, just personal enough that she questioned herself afterward. She asked Nina if Ryan had ever been like that. Nina asked if she was willing to speak confidentially. She was. That changed everything. I didn't rush to act. I explained carefully what it would mean, that it would likely be private, that there might not be immediate results, that there would be no public justice. She agreed anyway, not because she wanted revenge, but because she didn't want someone else to feel the way she had felt. That was when I understood that this wasn't just my story anymore. I drafted the letter over several evenings. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It did not accuse Ryan of crimes. It described patterns. It referenced dates. It attached documentation. It included statements from multiple people who agreed to be interviewed anonymously. It included my own history as context, not as the center. I wrote it like someone who expected to be questioned. I sent it to the company's ethics committee, to HR leadership, and to legal counsel. I did not CC Ryan. I did not warn him. I did not threaten to go public. Then, I waited. The first sign that something was happening was subtle. Ryan canceled a dinner with mutual friends at the last minute. Then he missed a conference he was supposed to speak at. Then Nina heard that HR had started scheduling routine interviews. People get nervous when interviews are routine. Ryan called me 3 weeks later. I hadn't heard his voice in months. It sounded sharper now, less confident. He asked if I knew what was going on. He said people were asking him questions. He said he felt attacked. He said someone was trying to destroy his reputation. I listened. Then I told him the truth. I told him I had spoken honestly about my experience. I told him others had done the same. I told him this was not an attack, but a consequence of patterns he had chosen to ignore. He accused me of being vindictive. He accused me of not moving on. He accused me of trying to control his life because I couldn't have it anymore. I told him calmly that I had moved on, and that this had nothing to do with control. It had to do with truth finally landing somewhere that could no longer ignore it. He hung up on me. For the first time since our divorce, I felt something close to peace. The investigation took months. That's how these things work. There were interviews, reviews, legal discussions, internal meetings that people pretended weren't happening. Ryan was still employed, but his authority shrank. Projects were reassigned. His calendar emptied. Invitations stopped coming. He was not fired immediately. That mattered. When consequences come slowly, they can't be dismissed as emotional reactions. Eventually, the company made a decision. They offered Ryan a severance package and a quiet exit. No public statement, no press, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing beyond internal language about cultural misalignment. That was the system protecting itself. But it was also the system drawing a line. Ryan texted me the day he left. He said I had ruined everything. He said he hoped I was satisfied. He said I would regret this one day. I didn't reply. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and felt the weight finally leave my body. Not all at once, not like a victory. More like setting down something heavy I had been carrying for years without realizing how tired my arms were. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became honest. Ryan disappeared from my daily thoughts. His name stopped tightening my chest. His image stopped haunting my sense of fairness. He became what he should have been earlier, a man responsible for his own choices. I didn't become harder. I became clearer. I fell in love again, slowly, with a man who didn't perform goodness, but practiced it. He showed up. He listened. He didn't need admiration to feel whole. Being with him felt like standing on solid ground after years of balancing on glass. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the woman I was before all of this. The woman who believed love was enough to protect you from harm. I don't judge her. She loved honestly. That still matters. Revenge didn't make me cruel. It made me careful. It didn't take my softness. It taught me where to place it. And when I look back now, I don't see a story about destruction. I see a story about refusal. Refusal to lie. Refusal to disappear. Refusal to carry someone else's shame. I took back my story, and I let the truth do the rest.